Part 74. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 735. Wang Ling's suspicions had been revealed before. The Yuri base near the sea had actually built a lot of thunder submarines. In addition to the dozen or so submarines that attacked the dock of General Luo Er's base, there were also some scattered in the ocean. Middle. However, Wang Ling had no idea where exactly they were distributed and how many there were. Continue, within range, covering bombing. Since he didn't know clearly, he could only give it a try. Wang Ling waved his hand and ordered numerous armed helicopters to continue bombarding. A row of armed helicopters took the order and immediately aimed at the sea ahead, firing cannons from near to far. For a while, the sound of dong 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 cannons was endless, as if they were going to blow up the ocean. The target sea area was plunged into turmoil by this bombardment, with constant shaking and huge water splashes jumping out, as if in protest. It looked like it was hit hard. "Hey, are you like this?" Agent Tanya was a little confused and shouted at the top of her lungs under the constant sound of gunfire. However, Wang Ling was standing opposite her, but it was as if he couldn't hear her. He just crossed his arms and looked at the water without saying a word. TCH, this was met with disappointment, and this time it was Agent Tanya's turn to be speechless. Boom. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a sudden movement on the sea surface. It turned out that the cannon shells actually hit a thunder submarine hidden here under the covering bombardment, forcing it to be exposed. Boom, boom, boom. Boom boom boom. Wow. Now that the target was discovered, there was no reason to let it go. A group of armed helicopters immediately changed the target and bombarded it with concentrated fire. Only one round of bombardment sank the Thunder submarine. However, after killing the submarine, this group of armed helicopters did not give up. They still maintained their original posture and continued to bombard the enemy forward. No, is it really okay? When she saw the Thunder submarine being searched out in this barbaric way, Agent Tanya was stunned. It's true that barbarians have barbaric methods. At this moment, Wang Ling sneered and said, "Barbaric or not, as long as it's effective, it's a good method. At least, I didn't let my subordinates go to die." "Okay, you're the best this time." Agent Tanya spread her hands. As arrogant as she was, but she had to admit defeat this time, but she was still complaining, "But you are really petty, and you can't catch one thing without doing it. Let it go." Wang Ling didn't speak anymore, and still maintained his posture and looked at the sea. The range of the armed helicopter is extremely long, but no matter how far it is, there is a limit. Compared with the width of the entire ocean, these distances are not worth mentioning at all. After a period of continuous bombardment, it came to an end. Under this blanket bombing, 2 Thunder submarines were detected one after another and were immediately sunk by armed helicopters. Counting the previous 2, there are 4 Thunder submarines lurking in just this limited sea area. Oh my god, Yuri base is really good. It has built so many submarines. It would be disgusting to die, Agent Tanya complained, then blinked and asked, "Wang Ling, you still want to move the location, use helicopter bombing?" Wang Ling shook his head, "No need, the ocean is too large and the armed helicopters can only detect a small part. Our time is precious, there is no need to continue to struggle with the remaining Thunder submarines." After finishing speaking, Wang Ling waved his hand and ordered, "Everyone is here, return to the base." "Yes." After receiving the order, many officers and soldiers quickly got on board, and the armed helicopters gradually transformed into flight mode, and the entire coalition force retreated in an orderly manner. Agent Tanya took one last look at the sea, and then commanded the Allied troops to return to the court. Although there are still an unknown number of Thunder submarines remaining in the coastal theater, they are hidden in the sea after all. As long as they do not enter the sea and order the base's air defense buildings and troops to keep an eye on any missiles that may be launched, there is nothing to worry about. For this reason, General Luo relaxed and ordered the engineers to rebuild the shipyard. At the same time, he also took an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and arrived at General Li Weiqi's base in advance. The two old guys reminisced about the past. After Wang Ling led the team to return, this only then did he reveal his foxtail. I'm talking about old Li. As Wang Ling is a hero of the coalition, he belongs to the entire coalition, not just your subordinates. These days, you lead Wang Ling to fight in the north and south, and I feel tired just watching. You, just rest in this coastal war zone and let Wang Ling follow me for the time being, and I will fight for you. He said this openly, but in fact he was poaching, and he was poaching General Li Weiqi in front of Wang Ling. As a result, Wang Ling was embarrassed, and General Li Weiqi felt as if he had been slapped on the monkey's butt. He was a little anxious. Hey, what nonsense are you talking about? I'm tired, why do you worry? It's true that Wang Ling is a hero of the coalition, but they are also soldiers under my command. Why should I hand them over to you? Don't be so hasty to refuse. Wang Ling is definitely tired of following someone around now. Why don't you stay with me for a while to get used to the new environment? General Luo didn't give up yet, and was still poking around hard. General Li Weiqi was so angry that he asked Wang Ling, is what he said true? General Luo quickly winked at Wang Ling, as if he wanted Wang Ling to cooperate with him, but Wang Ling looked dumbfounded and replied, General, I am a nostalgic person. I don't have anything to worry about. Please change as a general, you have to adapt again. I am a bit lazy, so. Wang Ling was too embarrassed to say the next words. After hearing this, General Li Weiqi looked at Luo with a proud look on his face. But General Luo was anxious and scolded Wang Ling, you little bastard, why are you so ignorant? Do you feel so wronged by following me? Wang Ling tugged at the corner of his mouth and was at a loss. But General Luo was not done yet, and turned to scold General Li Weiqi, and you old bastard, why are you so ruthless? You won't even lend me a person. I'm an old comrade with you for nothing. As a first-generation lieutenant general, General Luo's temperament is really ridiculous. He will directly scold him whenever he disagrees with him, completely disregarding his own identity and status. Although he was used to his temper, Wang Ling was still caught off guard by his scolding. However, General Li Weiqi was not surprised at all. He even scolded us with a smile, both and each other, you old bastard is not much better. You only want to poach me. I'll spare you the trouble. It's okay for the others. But Wang Ling, you can't dig it out. Pooh. General Luo was really speechless. He spat, crossed his arms angrily, and stopped talking. After his farce, General Li Weiqi turned his attention to Wang Ling and other heroes, nodded with satisfaction, and then held a conferring ceremony on the spot as usual. After successive battles, a large number of Wang Ling's soldiers were promoted in rank. A large number of soldiers were promoted from soldiers to non-commissioned officers, and another group were promoted from non-commissioned officers to lieutenants. Some elites were even promoted to school officers. It can be said that the entire army is the largest in the world. Promote. However, as the greatest hero, Wang Ling's military rank has remained unchanged, and he is still an invincible senior colonel. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 736. Speaking of which, Wang Ling's military rank was quite short when he held the position of senior colonel. During this period, he fought in the north and south, and actually made a lot of great contributions. According to the military merit rules of the coalition, it was actually enough to be promoted to the rank of an officer. However, PoortoRich has been unwilling to let go. After all, Wang Ling is still too young. Although he has outstanding military achievements, his qualifications are still young. He intends to train Wang Ling. The fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Wang Ling is also very aware of this. Although it is inevitable that he will occasionally criticize, on the whole he is happy to see it. After all, Wang Ling does not want to be promoted to the general level prematurely. If he is really promoted, he will definitely be the commander of the position. How can he be as leisurely as he is now and leave all the troubles to General Li Wiki? In fact, General Li Wiki had already noticed Wang Ling's little thoughts, but he did not expose them. Instead, he tried his best to help Wang Ling, and at the same time he was proud to have such a strong general under his command. After the investiture ceremony, it was already evening in the Red Alert world. Although there are still an unknown number of Thunder submarines scattered in the ocean in this coastal theater, but as Agent Tanya said, these are simply rootless ducks and cannot make much waves. That night, the three major bases temporarily built 2 air defense buildings on the seaside and dispatched some air defense troops to garrison, but the remaining personnel had already begun to celebrate. This is already the third war zone that the coalition and allied forces have pacified. As heroes of the war zone, one can imagine the joy in the hearts of these people. Although the overall war situation is not over yet, at least the coastal war zone has been stabilized. For this reason, during the celebration, many officers and soldiers also brought out spirits and drank freely. The Allied forces simply brought out barrels of red wine, which they enjoyed more than the Allied forces. Although the two armies had become enemies because of the battle for hegemony, at least they are still uniting at this stage. Under the threat of the Seoul Empire, they will not break up for a while. During the celebration, Agent Tanya even led a team of officers and soldiers. Holding a few barrels of red wine, ran to the coalition camp to eat and drink. However, the coalition forces did not refuse. A group of savage men even fought for all the barrels of red wine, feeling that they still had unfinished business. Naturally, when soldiers from the two camps gathered together in large numbers, friction was inevitable, but overall it did not cause much trouble. They always adopted the simplest response method, single combat. Although they were not convinced by each other, every time they challenged each other, a large number of people gathered around to watch the excitement. As a result, after a fight, a lot of anger was dissipated, and the effect was very obvious. Hey, Wang Ling. Wang Ling was also happy to see this. He had seen Sun Dehui deliberately looking for trouble. After giving a lesson to an allied team leader, he was happily drinking and grabbing red wine, but Agent Tanya suddenly appeared next to him. Turning around to look, Agent Tanya was also carrying a bottle of red wine. Her handsome little face was quite rosy, and her graceful figure seemed to be fully releasing the charm of the opposite sex. However, Wang Ling was single due to his strength. He didn't understand the style at all and didn't care. He just smiled inexplicably and said after touching the bottle with Tanya, "You are really courageous. You brought the team to our place to eat and drink. Hey, you have to speak conscientiously. We didn't come here empty-handed, and we don't count the food and drinks. Otherwise, where did the red wine in your hand come from?" Agent Tanya was not convinced and took a swig of red wine. Looking at the red wine in his hand, Wang Ling shook his head and smiled, took a sip casually, and sighed, "The food in the Red Alert world doesn't taste good, but the vodka tastes great, and the red wine is much better than ours." Red Alert world? Where are you? Agent Tanya didn't understand Wang Ling's words. The girl only thought that Wang Ling was talking about their hometown, so she didn't think about it carefully. She shook her head and said instead, "We will go to other war zones in 2 days. This time we shouldn't be able to fight together. Don't die without my help." Good guy. Although this girl means well when she speaks, she can make people choke to death when she says these words. Wang Ling was stunned for a moment, turned to look at Tanya, and suddenly laughed loudly. "Why are you laughing?" Tanya was confused again. Wang Ling said, "The person in this world who can kill me has not been born yet. It's you. In the beginning, I actually hoped that you would live. In the end, I will fight you alone and kill you with my own hands to avenge the instructor. You." Tanya was slightly angry when she heard this, and resisted the urge to kick Wang Ling and said, "You are really arrogant. You wanted to kill me personally at first, but what about now?" Wang Ling was silent on this question for a long time, and finally said sadly, "Now I really hope you die on the battlefield." You are really unreasonable. How could you talk like that?" Agent Tanya was furious. She clenched her fists and wanted to punch Wang Ling, but when she was about to strike, she forced herself to endure it. She snorted and turned away, not wanting to say another word to him. After he left, Wang Lingke said to himself, "I'm not a cold-blooded animal. I remember the instructor's hatred, but I don't want to deny the coordinated operations these days. If you die on the battlefield, I don't have to worry about it. Am I going to kill you with my own hands? No matter what, let's deal with the threat of the Soul Empire now." The banquet that night lasted until very late, until everyone was drunk, and then the party ended, leaving a few teams of people on duty, and everyone else went to sleep. When I woke up the next day, everything was as usual. Except for the remaining Thunder submarines, there is currently no war in the coastal theater. However, General Li Wiki, Wang Ling, and even Agent Tanya are not in a hurry to move to fight. After all, this is the era of super weapons, and the gene mutation of the Soul Empire is already around the corner, and they have to take the lead in dealing with this threat. The response method is the same as before. A large number of soldiers are stationed in combat bunkers, and the rest of the personnel are hiding in anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. There are no infantry figures in the entire base, which completely eliminates genetic mutations threats. As for the Allies, Wang Ling finally helped them, dispatching a group of engineers and helping them build a number of combat bunkers. The new Allied commander also took inspiration from Wang Ling's approach and built a large number of helicopters to carry the remaining Allied infantry in, minimizing the number of active infantry in the base as much as possible. After all preparations were completed, the gene mutation of the Soul Empire was finally ready. It seems that because the coastal theater has lost its combat effectiveness, the Mind Empire simply abandoned this theater. The superweapon was no longer used here. Instead, with the help of its mind detection ability, it fell into an Allied base in another theater. Although this Allied base is also preparing in advance, they do not have too many helicopters, nor do they have the coalition to help build combat bunkers. They just rely on reducing the density of troops as much as possible. As a result, under this cover, there are nearly 80 people. An infantryman was mutated into a wild orc, destroying everything around him indiscriminately. The Allied base has also been prepared for a long time. The snipers hiding in the base can shoot from a long distance and can kill a mad orc with up to 2 shots. In addition, several SEALs rushed forward and quickly shot at this group of mad orcs. In addition, Prism tanks and Phantom tanks opened fire together, and rocket pilots even flew up from the air to assist in the killing. The nearly 80 orcs were quickly exhausted under such annihilation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 737. As the last wild orc was shot and killed, this round of genetic mutation threats finally ended, and the coalition and allied officers and soldiers in various theaters breathed a sigh of relief. In the coastal theater, General Li Wiki's base and Tanya's agent base also began to relocate after the super weapon threat ended. Although the coastal theater has been pacified, the Thunder submarine lurking underwater is always a threat and cannot be completely ignored. However, Wang Ling and the others still had heavy responsibilities on their shoulders, but they did not have time to explore these thundering submarines bit by bit, so this task fell on General Luo Er. Without Wang Ling's strong combat power, General Luo Er's base would not participate in the relocation operation this time. Instead, it would serve as a defender and stay in the coastal theater, detecting and annihilating the thundering submarines like a minesweeper. Although the role of the defenders is also very important, it is always inferior to the troops who move to fight. For this reason, General Luo Er looked at the busy General Li Weiqi's base, not to mention how envious and jealous he was, and he was so angry that he didn't want to go to watch electronic videos, but I always peek at them quietly. However, General Li Weiqi has long been accustomed to his temperament, so it is not surprising at all, and preparations are still in progress in an orderly manner. This preparation work is actually simple, just one word: dismantle. Different from the previous war zone, whether it was the Holy City war zone or the Eastern Plains war zone, the subsequent defenders arrived from other places to take over the work. But this coastal theater is different. General Luo Er's base is already here, with a stable foundation and complete buildings in all aspects, so there is no need to leave anything specially for them. Of course, General Li Weiqi did not dismantle all of them. At least half of the battle bunker built in the base to deal with the gene mutation of the Soul Empire was left behind, and all the crack generators were also kept, as gifts. General Luo Er's parting gift. After all the preparations were completed, the entire army gathered and it was finally time to move. Luo Er, when we leave, we will definitely take your share to fight the enemy together. Take care. At the moment of farewell, General Li Weiqi even sent out parting words that sounded like gloating over the radio. General Luo Er's answer was even more straightforward: "Get out of here, I'll get annoyed when I see you. Ha ha ha." Finally, leaving behind a string of hearty laughter, General Li Weiqi's base, together with Wang Ling's temporary base, began a large-scale migration. The Binhai war zone was already their third war zone. The previous shifts of positions were all due to emergencies in other war zones. Wang Ling took the lead in leading troops to support them. But now, looking at all major war zones, the war is relatively stable. The two sides are attacking and defending each other, and it is difficult to see the result in a short time. Under this situation, when Wang Ling and the others moved to fight, they did not specifically select the war zone. Instead, they cooperated with Agent Tanya and moved in two different directions to rush to the nearest war zone, taking the coastline as the side and moving inward in sequence. Push forward and gradually pacify the war zones. The ultimate goal is to force the Soul Empire and expose the location of its headquarters. This kind of itinerary and plan is inevitably a bit arrogant, but in fact, Agents Wang Ling and Tanya have such arrogance. Especially Wang Ling, as his elite combat soldiers have been promoted to the 10-star Soldier King level, their combat power can almost crush most of the troops in Yuri base. Even the virus sniper cannot suppress Wang Ling at all now. Among the entire coalition forces, Wang Ling can be said to be the biggest nemesis of the Soul Empire, and his threat is even greater than that of super weapons. Naturally, with greater ability comes greater responsibility. With Wang Ling's current combat effectiveness, he has become the coalition's greatest weapon against the Mind Empire. The subsequent migration operations also confirmed this point. Wang Ling was like an invincible god of death. Wherever he led his army, there was no opponent. As long as he led the army to attack, his target, Yuri base, would only be destroyed. It can be described as fierce and majestic. Such an invincible posture, not to mention that the coalition forces were shaken up and down, even the allies were frightened. Even the Yuri troops began to notice Wang Ling. Whenever there was Wang Ling in the attacking troops, their target bases would be gather all the troops and focus on defense in order to block Wang Ling's attack. However, all defenses seemed futile in Wang Ling's eyes. The point of the sword was almost invincible, and it pushed forward all the way, gradually achieving its killing power. Maintaining this momentum, Wang Ling and General Li Weiqi's base fought together in the north and south. In just 1 month, they fought in 5 theaters and conquered more than 20 Yuri bases, leaving behind pacification wherever they went. The subsequent occupation of the battle flag was a great achievement. These successive battles also accumulated a lot of military experience for Wang Ling, and his SEAL troop was successfully promoted to the 10-star King Soldier level during the battle. However, this type of unit is not a heroic unit after all. It has the experience of being an elite combat soldier. The King of Soldier level SEAL team is not too conspicuous, but the rate of fire is suddenly accelerated. It is not as good as that of the elite combat soldier. It's even worse. What's more, the range has increased, nearly double the original range. Naturally, it is far inferior to the elite combat soldiers at the King of Soldiers level. Not only Wang Ling, but also the soldiers under his command have improved greatly after these successive battles. Take Chen Tong, Sun Dehua, and Erlu as an example. The 3 of them gained enough experience in the battle and have now all advanced to the 7-star ace level. The 3 ace level magnetic blast infantry, with their powerful electromagnetic attacks superimposed, were extremely powerful. Even Wang Ling was a little surprised. During the attack, Yuri base suffered enough from this. Except for these 3 people, almost 90% of Wang Ling's soldiers were promoted to the elite level. Wang Ling injected all of them with basic strengthening agents, raising the upper limit of the soldiers' level to the 5-star Special Forces level. In the subsequent battle, almost half of the soldiers were upgraded to 5-star level. Naturally, these consecutive battles also accumulated a huge amount of points for Wang Ling, totaling hundreds of thousands. The points at this time really became numbers in Wang Ling's eyes. Recalling the scene at the very beginning when Wang Ling was desperately trying to accumulate 100 points for basic enhancements, it can't help but make people sigh. With such a large amount of points, Wang Ling was naturally not stingy. In reality, he exchanged tens of thousands of yuan in cash and bought several expensive outfits, which was a real luxury. Of course, in reality, there were too many restrictions. Even if there were regular sources of funds, Wang Ling did not exchange too much to be on the safe side, otherwise it would be dangerous to attract the attention of the bank. More points were used in the red alert world. He selected more than a dozen loyal subordinates at the Special Forces level, and together with several captains, injected them all with intermediate enhancers. Then he switched arms and used them as magnetic blast infantry and SEALs. Some were randomly selected for conversion from the 3 types of infantry arms, corps and anti-aircraft infantry. This process was generally smooth, but there was an accident. One of his subordinates was unable to withstand the ordeal when he was injected with an intermediate enhancement injection, and died, causing Wang Ling to sigh. With the addition of these powerful subordinates, Wang Ling was even more sharp when attacking with his troops, and he had the posture of blocking the gods and killing the gods and Buddhas. The Mind Empire is very powerful, but according to Wang Ling's annihilation posture, it may be difficult to withstand it. However, after the 5th theater of war, after the Binhai theater was pacified and General Li Weiqi's base was moving to the next theater, some unexpected situations suddenly occurred. Generals Wang Ling and Li Weiqi received almost at the same time a message initiated by Allied General Bob. Emergency meeting, requesting all commander-level cadres of the 2 armies to gather for the meeting. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 738. Meeting. Why are we having a meeting at this time? After receiving this notice, Wang Ling was extremely confused. General Li Weiqi pondered for a while and then replied, "I don't know exactly why the meeting was held. However, this meeting should be very important, and the Allies should have obtained crucial intelligence." Wang Ling asked, "But what kind of information cannot be communicated through radio and has to be held face to face? And it is so grand that all commanders must participate." "I don't know any more. Although the war situation is now in our favor, we still cannot relax. The Allies are not fools. At this time, they require a large-scale face-to-face meeting. It must be the content of the meeting. It is too important, General Liwiki mused. Road. Wang Ling frowned and thought hard about this meeting. What on earth was going on that was worthy of General Bob, the Allied commander? Huh? Could it be, after thinking about it, an answer suddenly popped into Wang Ling's mind, could it be that the Allies discovered clues to the ultimate device of the Mind Empire? The goal of the Soul Empire is not to control the coalition and Allied forces, but to control human beings around the world. The war at this stage is just to clear some obstacles. To accomplish this goal, the Empire of the Mind needs an ultimate device with a psychic signal that can cover the entire world. However, Yuri said he wanted to control the whole world, but in fact no one knew whether what he said was true or false. This ultimate device was a bit unclear, and it was not known whether there was such a thing. Nowadays, although the total number of super weapons is twice that of the Soul Empire, and because agents Wang Ling and Tanya continue to switch to war, the overall trend of the war is biased towards the coalition and Allied forces, but this so-called ultimate device has always been suppressed by both sides. There is a mountain above Juntu, but so far there are no clues. When the two armies first joined forces, they set a general outline for the war. Although when encountering a major incident, the commanders of both sides have the right to request a meeting between the two sides. But under normal circumstances, this kind of meeting would not be held easily. After all, the two parties will inevitably have conflicts, and it is better not to meet frequently. But now, General Bob still initiated a meeting, and it was an emergency meeting, convening all commander-level personnel for a face-to-face meeting. If there was no very urgent and important news, General Bob would definitely not initiate this meeting. After thinking about it, the thing that most attracted General Bob's attention at the moment was the hazy ultimate device of the Mind Empire. It's not impossible, General Liwiki's eyes lit up after hearing this, if it's news about the ultimate device, it's completely worth this emergency meeting. However, the meeting location is in Shenglong Ancient City, which is not close to us. If this news is true, then no matter how far away we are, we have to go. Wang Ling's eyes were also very fiery. It was previously speculated that this ultimate device might be bluffing, but if there is any news, it will have to be taken seriously. After all, the ambition of the Mind Empire is too great. Once they succeed, this red alert world may be over. Okay. Without further ado, let's settle down the team and let's set off now. After hearing this, General Liwiki didn't hesitate too much and made a decision quickly. Originally, they were still going to rush to the nearest war zone and conquer the Yuri base there, but the priorities were not important compared with the ultimate device of the Soul Empire. The settlement of the team is not troublesome. After all, there are 4 deputies, as well as several captains and a team leader. It is very convenient to command the troops. Even if there is a sudden war, they can respond quickly. After the large troops were settled, Wang Ling and General Liwiki rode an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and rushed towards Shenglong Ancient City as quickly as possible. It is true that Wang Ling is not a commander yet, but his status is no worse than that of ordinary commanders, and he also has the title of temporary commander, so he is naturally qualified to attend the meeting. The ancient city of Shenglong was very far away from here. Even with the speed of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, it took nearly a full day to reach this ancient city, and then rush to the meeting place, the Oriental Church, without stopping. After being tired for so long, Wang Ling and General Liwiki inevitably had some backaches after getting off the bus, but they couldn't care less about complaining now, because commanders from Allied and Allied forces had already gathered in the Oriental Church. Most of these commanders were located closer than Wang Ling and the others. After receiving the news, although they had different attitudes, they still rushed to this place as soon as possible because of the overall situation. Among them, there are naturally many acquaintances of General Liwiki. They have not seen each other for a long time, so it is inevitable to greet each other. At the same time, many coalition commanders even took the initiative to say hello to Wang Ling, with a hint of eagerness in their attitude. After all, Wang Ling is the only hero-level unit in the coalition, with extremely powerful combat capabilities. In addition, he has made great achievements in the past years of fighting in the north and south. Even if he has not yet reached the officer level, he is enough to be on an equal footing with these veteran generals. Now that the meeting had not yet begun, Wang Ling simply had to be patient and responded one by one without raising his stance too high. In the following period, other commanders also arrived in the church area one after another. Many old comrades met and talked with each other. It was quite lively for a while. "Hi, Wang Ling, we meet again." In the midst of the excitement, Wang Ling suddenly heard the voice of Agent Tanya. Looking back, it turned out that Agent Tanya had also arrived in a helicopter. Agent Tanya seemed to have some back pain after sitting in the helicopter for too long. While saying hello, she was still twisting her waist, highlighting her voluptuous figure and attracting a lot of attention. But Agent Tanya was not as easygoing as Wang Ling. She ignored everyone and just joked to Wang Ling, "Sorry to disappoint you, I am still alive and did not die in the battle." Wang Ling twitched the corner of his mouth, recalling what he said at the celebration banquet before leaving, not to mention how embarrassing it was. During these days, Wang Ling fought in various war zones one after another and made great achievements in combat. Agent Tanya was not idle either and was also constantly fighting. However, Agent Tanya is a character in the Red Alert world after all, and is not as perverted as Wang Ling. With the help of super weapons these days, she has only managed to pacify 3 war zones, and she was seriously injured twice and almost died in battle. To be honest, Wang Ling felt somewhat complicated about Agent Tanya. She was obviously filled with hatred, but she was a comrade worth trusting, so that Wang Ling often didn't know where to place her. However, he didn't reach out to hit the smiling man. Now that the two armies were united, Wang Ling didn't go too far. He responded with a few symbolic words, which was regarded as a greeting. In the following period, commanders from all walks of life gathered together, and finally even the commander of the coalition forces, PoortoRich, arrived here in an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. Now that all the participants are gathered, this temporary emergency meeting can finally begin. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 739. There was inevitably some disagreement between the commanders of the two armies, but those who could do this clearly understood the priorities. Before the meeting began, there were no conflicts. They sat according to the positions of the two armies. Arriving at the large conference table in the church hall. As the initiator of this meeting, General Bob naturally sat down, while several assistants on the side seemed to be organizing something. After a while, General Bob cleared his throat, interrupted all the conversations present, and said, "Everyone, the Mind Empire is coming menacingly, vowing to destroy both our armies and even control humanity around the world. Against such a grand background next, our two armies have cleared up their past grievances and joined forces to cooperate. During this period, we have successively conquered Yuri Base and achieved fruitful results. As the commander of the Allied forces, I am deeply proud of this." These words, as an opening remark, always felt like the leader was summarizing his work. Although the scene was tense, everyone present was very human. The Allied commanders did not dare to interrupt due to the majesty of their commander, but the Allied forces did not do so at all. This scruple. Before General Bob had time to say the next sentence, a coalition commander was already impatient. "General Bob, just forget about these words. We are not here to listen to work reports." With the person taking the lead, others immediately echoed, "Yes. In the war zone where I am, the war is still very stalemate, and Yuri Base will often launch fierce attacks on us. Although I made careful arrangements before leaving, but the war is changing rapidly, and I can't guarantee whether the base is absolutely safe. If we delay it for too long, I'm afraid something will happen. Even General Luo joined in the fun. Hey, what this sentence says is that although our coastal theater is leveled, the Hahao people will not be forgotten even after Yuri base dies. There are countless thunder ships hidden in the ocean. Submarines. These days I send submarines and SEALs everywhere to detect mines, and I can find one or two from time to time. Now it seems that there is only the last area left without detection. I suddenly received news of an emergency meeting and hurriedly rushed. Come on, I'm not here specifically to hear these scenes. The commanders of the coalition forces intervened as if they were causing trouble. As a result, the coalition forces were not used to them. A commander immediately scolded them, "You are noisy, how unbecoming. There are no rules at all, not even what General Bob said." After speaking, interrupt one after another. However, the coalition forces did not buy it, and a coalition commander immediately retorted, "Don't put your rules on us. We came to the meeting because we thought there was something important, not to see you set the rules and talk about the situation. That is just a brief description of the general direction of the war. How come it has become a mere talk when it falls into your mouth?" After all, they are still members of the two major forces. Even if they are at the commander level, when they meet together, various conflicts will inevitably occur. Of course, these commanders who interrupt and quarrel are still a minority after all. They are considered the thorns in the first-level commanders, such as General Luo. Most of the others remained calm. Agents Wang Ling and Tanya were even a little bit dumbfounded. They looked at the quarreling generals with a completely cheerful attitude. Boom. Shut up, everyone. This is an emergency meeting, not a place for you to quarrel and get angry. However, before they could argue for too long, PoortoRich suddenly slammed the table, interrupting everyone. General Bob, whose face was a little dark because his speech was interrupted, finally relaxed after hearing these words, and then nodded to PoortoRich to express his gratitude. Of course, what was interrupted was only the group of quarrels and troublemakers, and the others were not affected. After everyone calmed down, Major General Lovsky suddenly asked, "General Bob, in the current war situation, however, you urgently summoned all the commanders for an emergency meeting. Is it because you have clues about the ultimate device of the Mind Empire?" It seems that General Wang Ling and Li Wiki are not the only ones who can think of this. When other commanders who were still a little dissatisfied heard this question, they all corrected their attitudes and stared at General Bob, wanting to hear his answer. Haha, it turns out there are many smart people in the coalition forces. Sure enough, General Bob smiled inexplicably and admitted the statement in disguise, causing almost everyone present to feel tense. Even many commanders of the coalition forces could not pay attention to the slight irony in General Bob's painting for a while. After all, this so-called ultimate device puts too much pressure on them. After all this trouble, the meeting finally got back on track. General Bob glanced at all the generals present, and then said, "Since you don't like the opening remarks, I will just omit it. Before getting to the point, let's watch a paragraph." Video. After speaking, at his signal, an assistant immediately turned on the projection device and played a special video on a flat wall. In this video, what appears is a large-scale city. The city is densely populated with people and vehicles. It seems that it has not been affected by the war, and it inevitably looks a bit prosperous. However, if you look closely, you will see that the expressions of the people in the city are very strange. Each of them seems to have a dull gaze, walking like a zombie on the streets of the city, giving people a feeling that they are completely in control. Is this, being controlled? Everyone present felt very uncomfortable. Thinking of the purpose of this meeting, they naturally connected the scene with the Empire of Mind. Sure enough, they guessed it right. The perspective of the video kept moving in the city. When it moved to the center of the city, a large park appeared, and outside the park, a large number of Yuri infantry were stationed. There are dozens of tanks and more than 10 laser UFOs. In addition, defense facilities of the Mind Empire are also built on all sides of the park, and there is a biochemical reactor not far away to supply power. Of course, these are not the main things. The most shocking thing is that there is a very weird building standing in the middle of the park. This building is not too big in size. It has a solid octagonal base. On the main trunk above the base, there is a weird spider-like facility interspersed with it. At the top is a pole that looks like an irregular trident, rotating slowly and orderly. What is this? It's so strange. After fighting the Soul Empire for so long, it seems that I have never seen this kind of building. Could it be that people in the entire city are in a state of confusion because of this kind of building? Many commanders started to murmur when they saw this strange building. However, Wang Ling was so startled that he almost stood up. The more he looked at this building, the more familiar it felt. He quickly flipped through the mixed information in his mind, and finally remembered the name of this thing, Psychic Beacon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 740. That's right, what appears on the screen is the spiritual beacon of the Mind Empire. In fact, most of Wang Ling's understanding of the world of Red Alert came from the battles in the game. He had not seen many expansion packs, and he was not too concerned about the plot of the new campaign mode. As far as he knew, this psychic beacon had never appeared in the Psychic Empire in the battle mode. Wang Ling only vaguely remembered that this psychic beacon had appeared several times in the new campaign mode. However, those few appearances did not play any obvious role, and Wang Ling did not take it too seriously. When he explained the various arms and technologies of the Soul Empire at the joint meeting, he did not even think about it. Think of this spiritual beacon. Now that I saw the video material of the Red Alert world, I suddenly remembered this thing. As for the function of this psychic beacon, Wang Ling didn't know much about it. He only vaguely remembered that this kind of thing is very dangerous. If the function is fully exerted, the consequences will be extremely serious. Damn it, how could you have forgotten this kind of thing? Wang Ling couldn't help but feel a little annoyed when he thought about the confusing information in his mind. His success in the Red Alert world is inseparable from his identity as a player. Because he is very familiar with the technology of various arms of both the enemy and ours, he is often confident when doing things and fighting, relying on his strong combat power. But now, he saw something that he had forgotten but was very terrifying. This feeling of being beyond the control was very scary and unpleasant. For this reason, Wang Ling didn't even wait for General Bob and the others to explain. He directly contacted Uncle Hay, returned to the Red Alert world, and temporarily searched the spiritual beacon of the spiritual empire with his mobile phone. If you don't check, you won't know. If you check, you will be shocked. It turns out that this spiritual beacon is a unique and powerful mind control weapon of the Mind Empire. After it is completed, it can release a powerful spiritual field, destroy the intelligence of all sentient creatures within the range, and control them. The most terrifying thing is that the scope of this spiritual beacon can actually cover an entire city. It's no wonder that in the church video, people in the entire city showed confused expressions. Their emotions have been widely controlled by the spiritual beacon. Regarding this spiritual beacon, even Yuri himself said, "This is my spiritual beacon. With it, we can send the information we want. The enemy's mind, body, if you want, there are the souls will all be ours." There were not many words, but Yuri's strong confidence in this weapon was already revealed. Obviously, the ultimate device mentioned by Yuri, the weapon that wants to control the world, is probably related to this psychic beacon. Good guy, I haven't paid much attention to such a scary thing before. After checking the information, Wang Ling couldn't help but feel a little horrified. I have no impression of this so-called ultimate device. Emotions are this thing. Huh. It doesn't seem right. Isn't Yuri's goal to control the whole world? The spiritual domain of the ultimate device should also cover the whole world. Although the spiritual domain of this spiritual beacon is very large, compared with this so-called ultimate device, it seems to be far behind. What is going on? At this time, even as a player, Wang Ling became confused. This feeling was not comfortable at all for Wang Ling. Hey, let's see what intelligence the allies have collected first. He couldn't figure it out on his own, and Wang Ling didn't get too caught up in it. After lying down, he closed his eyes and returned to the world of Red Alert. In this Red Alert world, the video data is still playing, and a group of commanders around are still whispering to each other, each expressing their own surprise and doubts. Although Wang Ling had temporarily obtained some information from the real world, what he knew was not necessarily more than the information about the Allies. At this time, he simply remained silent, just staring at the video, lowering his head in thought. After revealing the important information about the psychic beacon, the video did not end immediately. Instead, it continued to slowly shift the perspective, and soon it locked on a group of people approaching from far and near. The leader of this team looked to be in his 50s. His back was slightly stooped when he walked, but his steps were very steady. He was wearing a yellow military coat, his skin was slightly white, and his eyes were gloomy. There is a unique mark carved on his forehead. He has no hair, but there is a half circle of metal arcs on the top of his head, extending out lines of unknown material, leading to the clothes on his back. Seeing this man, a group of coalition commanders frowned, because this man turned out to be Yuri himself. Behind Yuri, there were two people. One of them looked very similar to Yuri, but he was riding a suspended machine. He turned out to be the heroic unit of the Soul Empire Yuri X. Next to Yuri. After Wang Ling saw this image, he narrowed his eyes. He seemed to know this scientist. In addition to the three of them, there were more than a dozen elite-level Yuri recruits behind them. There was nothing special about this group of people, and they were just guards at best. This group of people walked straight into the park. All the city residents they met along the way bowed at 90 degrees and saluted, looking very humble. When he came to the park and walked to the psychic beacon, after observing it for a while, Yuri smiled, pointed at this thing, and said to the scientist behind him, "This is my psychic beacon. With it, we can send the message we want. The enemy's mind, body, and soul, if you want, will be ours. It is indeed a world created according to the game." What Yuri said is almost exactly the same as the information Wang Ling has checked. And here the video finally ends. However, the controversy caused by the video is far from over. Psychic beacon controls the mind, body, and soul? My dear, what kind of terrifying building is this? A whole city. People in a whole city look so confused. Is it because of this spiritual beacon? How big is this spiritual beacon? It can actually control an entire city of people. It's simply terrifying. Could this be the ultimate device of the spiritual empire? Almost all the commanders present, whether they were allied or coalition forces, had extremely ugly expressions at this time. Many people were talking about it, and even Agent Tanya frowned. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 741. At this time, no one at the scene dared to despise this meeting anymore. As can be seen from the video, the threat to them from the spiritual beacon of the Mind Empire was so great that they could not even care about the alliance and alliance. The grievances between the armies were over. General Bob saw the reaction of this group of commanders and nodded with satisfaction. At least this group of people had realized the seriousness of the matter. However, when he shifted his gaze and saw Wang Ling's reaction, he couldn't help but frown slightly. Because Wang Ling had just viewed the psychic beacon information from the real world, he was not too shocked by the video information. He still had a pensive expression. Since the joint meeting, Wang Ling has shown supercognition, and even has information channels that no one else knows about. However, there is no information about psychic beacons in those messages. Now that all the videos of the psychic beacon were played, he thought Wang Ling could know something, but this reaction made General Bob a little unpredictable. General Bob, in this video, are all the people in the city controlled by that strange building in the square? After a while of confusion, someone finally asked General Bob. General Bob nodded cautiously and said, "That's right. You can tell from Yuri's words in the video that this kind of building is called a psychic beacon. After fighting against the Yuri base of the psychic empire for so long, I think you should. I am also very aware of the strength of the mind empire, which is mind control. However, a single mind trooper can only control one of our units, a mind control tower can control 3, and a mind control vehicle with more than 3 will cause overloaded and blood loss. These are only war-level controls, but this spiritual beacon can fully expand the spiritual realm to the entire city and control all sentient creatures in the city." After receiving General Bob's recognition, many commanders on the scene took a breath of air. PoortoRich clenched his fists and said angrily, "This kind of thing is simply a forbidden weapon, contrary to human morality, and more terrifying than a super weapon. Isn't it? The person who controls the entire city is simply terrifying and inhumane. Yes, they have actually developed this forbidden weapon. The Empire of Mind is completely against all mankind." Several commanders also agreed one after another. This group of people was really shocked by the spiritual beacon. But General Bob snorted coldly and said, "Don't forget why our two armies joined forces. Isn't it because the Soul Empire is too ambitious and threatens all mankind, including our two armies? Yuri's goal is compared with this goal of controlling the whole world and enslaving the entire human race. A psychic beacon covering the entire city is really not surprising." After hearing what he said, the indignant commanders at the scene finally fell silent, and then Agent Tanya asked directly, "General, is the psychic beacon the ultimate device of the psychic empire?" General Bob pondered for a while before answering, "Now it seems like it should be like this. But, General Bob, there seems to be something wrong with this. Isn't the goal of the psychic empire, or Yuri's, to control all mankind? Although the psychic beacon controls an area large enough to cover the entire city, it is not comparable to his goal. Compared to that, it's still a small thing compared to a big witch." Then a commander asked. Naturally, other commanders could also think of the problems that Wang Ling thought of in the real world. As for this question, let alone other commanders, even Wang Ling raised his eyebrows and stared at General Bob intently, wanting to know the answer to the question. General Bob didn't sell it, and made it clear directly, "According to the information we received, the ultimate device of the Soul Empire is indeed related to this kind of psychic beacon. However, the information we received is also very limited, and we cannot accurately judge real situation. According to our guess, there should be two possibilities for the ultimate device. 1. The psychic beacon in the video is just an experimental version of the Empire of Mind, so its range is much smaller than their ultimate device. The most powerful, the psychic beacon, which is enough to cover the entire world, is still under development, or it can be said that it has been developed and is still in production. Experimental product? Maybe it's possible. But if it's just an experimental product, you can imagine how terrifying the final version will be. I'm afraid it won't be developed in a short time." After hearing this first judgment, Wang Ling nodded silently. While admitting it, he was also thinking about how likely this was. Similarly, other commanders have similar thoughts. General Bob ignored their thoughts and continued, Although this method is possible, after we discussed it, we always felt that the possibility is not very high. After all, an experimental psychic beacon is so terrifying. The ultimate device, naturally, it is even more exaggerated, and of course it is more difficult to develop. The most important and most likely possibility is the second possibility. After glancing at the many commanders present, General Bob said, "We have discussed this in detail, and we always feel that we may have fallen into a cognitive misunderstanding before. The Empire of Mind wants to control humans around the world, and we all thought that this was we need to create an ultimate device that can cover the whole world. But who said there can only be one ultimate device? What's the meaning? Could it be?" At this point, most of the commanders present were suddenly stunned and their expressions suddenly changed. That's right. We discussed this for a long time, and finally agreed that the psychic beacon in the video is the ultimate device of the Soul Empire. However, there should be far more than one such ultimate device. Within the influence of the Soul Empire, I'm afraid there are similar psychic beacons everywhere. And Yuri wants to control humans around the world. Instead of spending a lot of energy to develop what we think is the most powerful device, it is better to build a large number of psychic beacons everywhere to form a spiritual domain network. Finally, it will cover the whole world. Although this is cumbersome, time-consuming, and labor-intensive, it is the easiest way to achieve the goal at the moment. General Bob finally stated his most likely guess. After hearing this conjecture, almost all the commanders on the scene took a breath of cold air. The madness of the Mind Empire simply shocked them. Not to mention them, even Wang Ling, as a player, couldn't help but widen his eyes and thought about it. This possibility is really not small. After Yuri's rebellion, Wang Ling thought about this question in the real world: is Yuri stupid? Why are you so anxious to rebel? If we are really researching the ultimate device, then if the ultimate device comes out and is launched directly to control human beings around the world, wouldn't it be over and done with? Why bother to rebel in advance and trigger a large-scale war? Now, combined with General Bob's conjecture, Wang Ling came up with the answer. It's not that emotional Yuri doesn't want to wait until the end, but that the spiritual beacon of his spiritual empire wants to expand, which will inevitably lead to a war with the coalition and allied forces. This battle is simply unavoidable. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 742. Isn't it? If you want to control mankind around the world, war is absolutely inevitable. As the two strongest forces in the Red Alert world, the Alliance and the Allied forces, are the biggest obstacles for the Mind Empire to control the world. If this psychic beacon needs to be expanded, other places may be able to suppress it through military force, but within the scope of the coalition and allied forces, all living forces must be forcibly eliminated through war before the psychic beacon can be built. When the Alliance and the Allies were fighting for hegemony, Yuri had to compromise and stay in the Alliance camp, secretly developing the spiritual empire. Seeing the two armies fighting each other, he had no time to care about anything else. But later, when the battle for hegemony reached a later stage, with the rise of Wang Ling and the emergence of Kirov airships, the Allied forces quickly fell into decline. Seeing that the battle for hegemony was about to end, Yuri could not sit still and rebelled in advance. Yes, this is the most likely possibility. If this is the case, then all the previously unreasonable points will almost be settled. In this short moment, through the news from General Bob, Wang Ling finally figured out these contradictions, and felt like a sudden enlightenment. But correspondingly, this kind of news and conjecture also made Wang Ling feel heavy in his heart. Of course, he was not the only one. All the commanders on the scene were also deep in thought. Many people also figured out these contradictions and looked very ugly. Combined with what Yuri and the Empire of Mind have done before, the possibility of this second conjecture is very high. As the commander of the coalition forces, PoortoRich finally expressed this idea on behalf of everyone. However, After saying that, he then asked, "General Bob, in this video, where did your army come from? Where is the city in the video specifically? The locations of other psychic beacons in the Empire of Mind, do you have any clues? How many spiritual empires have been built so far?" As if aware of the seriousness of the situation, PoortoRich dropped a bunch of questions in one breath, and each one was extremely important intelligence information. Faced with these questions, General Bob was somewhat embarrassed. After a short moment of silence, he reopened the video just now, paused it on the scientist's interface, and said, "PoortoRich's question, once there's so much to throw out about sex, and before I answer your questions, I'd like to ask you to meet someone." "Know someone? Is he the scientist in the video? Who is he? I felt strange when I just watched the video. Yuri seems to treat him differently, and his status seems to be very high. Could the clue to the spiritual beacon be on his body?" After a group of commanders heard this, they couldn't help but murmured. General Bob didn't give them much time to be suspicious, so he took the initiative to say, "This man is the top scientist of our allies, Einstein." "Einstein? Oh my God, it's him. Einstein? From the Allies. Why are the Allied scientists following Yuri? And it seems that they are quite respected. What's going on?" A group of commanders murmured again. Einstein's reputation is quite famous in this red alert world, but most of the Allied commanders have only heard of his name, but have never met him in person. After all, they do not work in the same field. As for the coalition commander, they don't know much about him, and it is even the first time for many people to hear this name. Einstein? It's indeed him. Wang Ling's eyes lit up after hearing the name. Einstein was a famous scientist and physicist in reality. There is even such a #1 scientist in the game. There is a special level in the new Allied Camp campaign mode where Einstein needs to be rescued. So when he saw the video, Wang Ling had already guessed the scientist's identity, but he didn't expect that he would guess it correctly. Pressing his hand and interrupting the group of confused commanders, General Bob explained in detail, in the initial stage of Yuri's rebellion, the Mind Empire quietly sent an armed force to sneak into our Allied territory and solved the problem. The guards forcibly captured Einstein. Although Einstein was only one person, his role was as important as that of several military bases. Therefore, the top leadership also specially dispatched a large number of agents and spies, specifically looking for Einstein. However, the headquarters of the Mind Empire was too hidden. Until this period of time, these agents and spies found no clues. Until a few days ago, Einstein took the initiative to contact. They contacted us and sent us an encrypted intelligence email. The intelligence I just mentioned, as well as this video, all come from that email. This information about the emotional allies actually came from Einstein. Wang Ling was also a little surprised after hearing this. This Einstein is really good enough. The Mind Empire secretly captured Einstein at the beginning of the war, probably to use Einstein's ability to develop their ultimate device. However, they did not expect that Einstein would secretly reveal this information. Einstein's information? Can you trust it? However, among the people at the scene, it was obvious that some people did not trust this information, or Einstein, too much. For example, Major General Lovsky said, "It's not that I deliberately doubt your scientists, but our opponent is Yuri. We have indeed seen how cunning Yuri is, but Einstein sent the information under Yuri's sphere of influence. Can your army really be sure that it came from Einstein? If it came from him, and how can we be sure that he was not controlled by Yuri and falsely conveyed information to deliberately set us up?" Major General Lovsky's concerns were indeed justified. After hearing this, many coalition commanders at the scene became more cautious and wary of this information. However, the Allies were very unhappy. Immediately, an Allied Major General asked with a dark face, "General, Are you doubting the capabilities of our allies? Is it really the work of Einstein? Is it true? Can't we find out yet? I'm not targeting your army's capabilities. I'm just being cautious and making more confirmations. After all, this information is very important and there is no room for sloppiness. Major General Lovsky crossed his arms and answered righteously. Oh, you mean we are sloppy? Stop. The Major General was still planning to make a sarcastic comment, but General Bob was too lazy to listen to their argument anymore, so he simply interrupted, glanced at Major General Lovsky, and then smiled and replied, "It's a good habit to be cautious, we don't have it reason to blame. The intelligence did come from Einstein's hand, because we used Einstein's special password to crack the email. It is impossible for the Mind Empire to know these passwords. As for whether it is controlled, your army does not need it. Worry, Einstein's mind is very powerful, and his mental strength is not even worse than that of anyone present. And there are many people in the scene whose mental strength is so strong that they are not affected by mind control, let alone Einstein. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 743. Oh. Maybe, it's really possible. After Wang Ling heard this explanation, he squinted his eyes and believed it immediately. After all, Einstein is so smart and his brain is very strange. It is difficult for Wang Ling to judge how strong Einstein's mental power is, but he can guess it. I am afraid he will not be worse than him. That's it. And Wang Ling's current mental strength is enough to be immune to the mind control of the Mind Empire, let alone Einstein. The most important thing is that in the game, in the new Allied campaign mode, in the stage of rescuing Einstein, Einstein did still belong to the Allied camp after being successfully rescued, and there was no sign of being controlled. With these 2 points, Wang Ling had reason to believe that General Bob was not lying. However, others did not understand this. The commander of the Allied camp naturally believed in General Bob unconditionally. However, some people in the Allied camp raised questions. General Bob, we don't know this scientist. How can we talk about his spirit? The power is stronger than everyone present, how can we believe this? That's right, based on your words, we really can't be sure. After all, none of us have ever come into contact with Einstein. After several questions, many of the Allied commanders looked a little ugly. Just when General Bob gritted his teeth and was about to refute, PoortoRich suddenly raised his hand to interrupt all the coalition commanders, and then looked at Wang Ling, as if asking for Wang Ling's opinion. After all, even PoortoRich had to be convinced and admit Wang Ling's supercognitive ability in this red alert world. On this issue, Wang Ling's opinion is crucial. Wang Ling also understood what PoortoRich meant and nodded calmly. After receiving this information, PoortoRich smiled confidently and responded, General Bob, I believe what you just said. Even the coach chose to believe it, and the other coalition commanders who questioned it were really hard to say anything. After taking a look at each other, they finally chose to keep silent. The faces of many Allied commanders finally looked better, and General Bob also closed his eyes and let out a sigh of relief. Afterwards, PoortoRich continued to ask, did Einstein's information explain the location coordinates of all psychic beacons? To be honest, after learning that Einstein was not under control, PoortoRich was somewhat looking forward to it. After all, looking at the video, Einstein is highly regarded by Yuri and has the ability to provide intelligence to the Allies. He is simply a high-level spy. Unexpectedly, General Bob actually shook his head. No, Einstein's intelligence only illustrates the horror of the psychic beacon of the psychic empire. The extended information about the psychic beacon is all our speculation. In fact, Einstein, in addition to revealing important information about the Seoul Empire, Stan's email also serves the main purpose of asking for help. Help. Regarding General Bob's statement, not to mention the Allied forces, even many Allied commanders looked puzzled. General Bob nodded and said, "Yes, although Yuri covets Einstein's superintelligence and thinks highly of him, he is a scientist of our Allied forces after all. He has been thinking about ways to escape these days. But because the Seoul Empire is heavily guarded, I have never been able to find an opportunity, so I studied the technology of the Seoul Empire and found a loophole. I hope to escape from Yuri's clutches with our help. Is there any substantial benefit to us in helping Einstein escape?" As for the coalition forces, some people immediately raised questions, and even many commanders nodded seriously. Again, the alliance between the two armies was only due to pressure. From the bottom of my heart, the coalition did not want the Allies to become bigger and stronger. Obviously, if Einstein was rescued, with his super scientific research capabilities, it will definitely be even more powerful for the Allied forces, and many commanders of the Allied forces naturally do not want to see this scene. As for the Allies, they were well aware of the coalition's concerns. No one expressed dissatisfaction with this question. Even General Bob was still explaining, "Of course. Don't forget, Einstein is in Yuri's army, having been by his side for a long time. He must know many secrets of the spiritual empire. For example, we know nothing about the spiritual beacons that we care about most. How many are there and where are they distributed? However, Einstein must know some or all of them. All. As long as we rescue Einstein, combined with his intelligence and targeted layout, the plan of the Mind Empire will inevitably fail. Good guy, this temptation is really big." After hearing this, many coalition commanders had no reason to question it even if they were reluctant. Then PoortoRich asked, "So, what is the loophole that Einstein found? How should we save him?" This is the top priority of this meeting. Finally, when it came to the key issue, General Bob's eyes narrowed and he explained slowly, "The defense method of the Mind Empire is relatively unique. The most difficult thing is mind control. There are even mind detectors in the base, which can clearly detect the targets of our army in the area within a certain range are marked and clearly displayed on the corresponding electronic map." This information was mentioned by Wang Ling during the joint meeting. You should still remember it, right? All the commanders, including Wang Ling, nodded. General Bob continued, "Here is the loophole. After a long period of secret research, Einstein initially understood its operating principle and discovered a way to shield mind detection. However, this method is very limited. Can only be used on infantry, is relatively expensive, and somewhat useless. It can only be used to rescue spies under special circumstances, and cannot be used in large-scale wars." It's interesting. PoortoRich held his chin up, pondered for a while and then asked, "But, the most difficult thing to deal with is mind control, right?" "Good." General Bob immediately replied, "So this method is very limited, because even if ordinary spies are sent to escape the mind detection, they will be caught by the endless mind control of the Mind Empire. Therefore, in order to successfully rescue Einstein, it is necessary to send people with strong enough mental power, who are not affected by mind control, to sneak into the enemy camp disguised as enemy targets, find Einstein, and adapt to circumstances to find opportunities to rescue him. This task is very difficult, so the personnel dispatched must have strong adaptability and strong combat effectiveness. Looking at the coalition and allied camps, there are only 2 people who agree with this condition." Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 744. There are only 2 people in the coalition and allied forces combined. Are the requirements so demanding? After hearing this, all the commanders at the scene were shocked. Although General Bob has not elaborated on who these 2 people are, in fact, the direction is already obvious. There was not a single fool among the on-site commanders. They all thought of it immediately and looked at Agents Wang Ling and Tanya. That's right, his mental power is so strong that he can ignore mind control, and he is also powerful in combat and has strong adaptability. Only the hero-level units of the two armies, Agents Wang Ling and Tanya, have this kind of character. Naturally, during this period, the commanders on site were also honing their mental strength intentionally or unintentionally, but few were able to achieve the level of disregarding mind control. Even though they have surpassed this level, in terms of combat effectiveness and survivability, even PoortoRich and General Bob at the scene may not be able to match Wang Ling and Agent Tanya. Let me take it easy, why did such a big trouble fall on me? Wang Ling wasn't stupid either. He immediately understood what was going on and felt very unhappy in his heart. After all, this mission is too special and too dangerous. If he is not careful, he will be trapped in a tight siege and be surrounded and suppressed by the huge armies of the Seoul Empire. In that case, even Wang Ling has no confidence that he can escape. Just when Wang Ling was complaining, General Bob had already spoken out. Everyone guessed correctly, these two qualified people are Wang Ling from your army and Tanya from our army. No. This mission is too dangerous, you can't act like this. After General Bob confirmed the list, without waiting for Wang Ling to say anything, a general suddenly stood up and refuted. Everyone followed the voice and saw that it was General Li Wiki who was protesting. After all, he was still his own general. General Li Wiki was not worried about Wang Ling putting himself in danger and resisted such a mission from the bottom of his heart. Wang Ling didn't say anything, but nodded slightly to General Li Wiki to express his gratitude. The other commanders seemed to have not been able to accept this method, and they could not say anything for a while. However, General Bob asked, if you don't use this method, do you have other methods? No. However, we can always think of a way. This method is inappropriate and I don't agree with it. Even if we dispatch a large army to attack and forcefully rescue Einstein, it is safer than this method. General Li Wiki also refused to give in. However, General Bob smiled, force attack. It's not that we haven't thought of this method, but Einstein is in that city shrouded in psychic beacons, and ordinary troops cannot enter at all, let alone attack by force. There are 3 major Yuri bases stationed inside and outside the city, with extremely strong defensive capabilities. This method is truly inappropriate. General Li Wiki wanted to continue to protest, but at this time, Agent Tanya suddenly spoke and interrupted him, are you afraid that something will happen to Wang Ling? Humph. When she revealed this little idea, General Li Wiki snorted coldly and did not answer. Quan took it as acquiescence. But Agent Tanya was happy. General, don't forget that besides Wang Ling, there is also me. I am a woman who didn't say anything, but you are protesting fiercely. If you say it, even Wang Ling has to get a reputation as a hypocrite. Her words made Wang Ling choke up. Before she said these words, she was suddenly labeled as hypocritical. General Li Wiki's expression was even more ugly, but as Agent Tanya said, being too defensive in this situation would be detrimental to Wang Ling. Rumors like the heroes of the coalition forces are cowards might even spread, which would have a huge impact. Bad. It seemed that Agent Tanya's words reminded him, and General Bob also laughed. General, it is a good habit to protect one's shortcomings. No one wants anything to happen to their beloved general, and neither do I, but things should be prioritized. At this necessary moment, Agent Tanya did not protest and was ready to take action, but your army is still pushing back and forth. Is it possible that Wang Ling, who is also a hero-level unit, has less basic courage than Agent Tanya? Hearing what he said, many coalition commanders at the scene frowned, but the current situation was special and no one spoke to refute. As for the group of allied commanders, they smiled quite playfully, and some of the thorns even showed some ridicule and disdain, but they didn't want to push people too hard. It was rare that no one said anything sarcastic at this time. Noticing this scene, General Lewiki's face turned a little dark, but he was also aware of his impulse, and he calmed down at this time. Forget it, I am an old guy, I am not qualified to make decisions on behalf of young people. Wang Ling, the decision whether to agree to this operation or not is still up to you. Just rest assured, if you don't agree, no one at the scene will dare to embarrass you. Well, Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh. This problem still came to his head. Although General Lewicki tried his best to relieve Wang Ling's pressure in the end, just look at the playful expressions of the surrounding Allied commanders and you will know that under the same circumstances, Agent Tanya obeyed the order, but Wang Ling refused. This reputation is terrible. It really stinks, no matter what the reason is. How much is reputation worth? Although this thing is not painful or itchy, the pressure of public opinion from gossip can really crush people to death. Carrying the name of a coward, Wang Ling may not be able to hold his head up no matter where he goes, and he has to the entire coalition army will be affected if people say that the coalition hero is a coward. After all, as a hero of the coalition forces, Wang Ling is now a benchmark in the minds of many officers and soldiers within the coalition forces. Whether he likes it or not, he is already a role model. Really, I don't want to cause trouble, trouble comes to me. In this situation, do I have any room to retreat? In the end, Wang Ling spread his hands and told the truth, which actually made many commanders on the scene laugh. Agent Tanya praised very grandly, this is like a man. If you really refuse, I will really look down on you. Cut. Wang Ling didn't want to pay attention to her, just crossed his legs and curled his lips. Okay. You are worthy of being a hero of the coalition forces, with extraordinary courage. Regardless of whether it was positive or negative, at least General Bob also praised it afterwards. After the praise, General Bob said, however, you two don't have to be so decisive. Although this task is difficult and dangerous, we will not just watch you die. After all, you are the heroes of our two armies. Fight against the Empire of the Soul still needs the fighting power of the two of you.